controls the past, controls the future. Who controls the present, controls the past.
Welcome to the Infowars Nightly News. I'm David Knight. It's Thursday, October 15th, 2015. Here are our top stories.
Tonight, a look back at Hillary Clinton's performance at the Democratic debate as she flip-flops and revises history.
I'm a progressive, but I'm a progressive who likes to get things done. And I know how to find common ground. I know how to stand my ground.
She doesn't want to use the S word, socialist.
Then, start your Thursday off right, or left, with a little boogie woogie from Bernie Sanders on The Ellen Show. Plus, the Pope is now asking for forgiveness after gay sex scandals have rocked the Vatican and Rome.
It is inevitable that there will be scandals.
And what will DARPA dream up next? Drones that vanish into thin air? That can't be good. All that plus much more coming up next on the Infowars Nightly News.
Well, one of the key things that came out of the debate 2 nights ago was the refusal of the other 4 candidates to challenge Hillary Clinton on anything. And as a result of that, we have seen the media, the Democrat leftist media, as well as the Democrat National Committee coalesce around Hillary Clinton to try to keep Joe Biden, the only person who would really seriously challenge her, I think, to keep him out of the race. And of course, we saw Bernie Sanders dancing on the Ellen DeGeneres show, basically dancing to Hillary's tune. That's what we saw in the debate as he tried to deflect criticism away from her national security violations, just calling it her emails. He says he's sick of hearing about her emails. Well, I'm sick of seeing this being spun as something as trivial as her emails. This is about the new national religion in Washington, and that is national security. Everything the government does is based on national security. Everything must be subordinate to it. Our rights, the rule of law, everything must be subordinate to national security. And yet you have someone here who willfully violated national security for whatever purposes, and she's not going to be held accountable. And it's the candidates themselves who are pushing away this criticism. Now, today we saw from the Democrat National Committee a chairwoman who is not a chairwoman, but a committee woman who is on the that DNC committee, saying that the party is clearing a path for Hillary because the women in charge want it that way. Well, who would those women be? That would be essentially the lesbian lefties who are supporting her candidacy. This committee woman rattled off a list of women at the top of the party hierarchy, said that 2 vice chairs helped to craft a decision that this summer in order to favor Clinton. She said that her party could promote Hillary because she's a woman, and they risk having her implode after she's nominated. In other words, let's not get into the situation of pushing her because she's a woman. And if you remember at the very end of the debate, Hillary, when asked the question, how would your administration differ from Obama's? And she says, well, I'm a woman. In other words, I get a chance to do this because we've done the identity politics thing, electing a black man. Now we need to do the identity politics thing and elect a woman simply because I'm a woman. But this is a woman who is on the DNC and says we don't want to go down that path. We don't want to have somebody who is not challenged but put into place simply because she's a woman and then find out in the general election that she's not up to the candidacy. She says, I haven't heard anyone say we should make Hillary undergo a trial by fire. To the contrary, the women in charge seem eager more and more to have her skate into the general election. It's not healthy for the party if we get behind a woman because she's a woman and risk having her implode after she's nominated because she isn't tested sufficiently. They go on to say this time around, the DNC has sanctioned only 6 debates. Offering more might have the effect of giving an indecisive Vice President Joe Biden a broader opportunity to jump into the race and give Clinton a formidable challenge. But of course, that's not going to happen. We see increasingly the media coming out and saying if Biden's only rationale is that Clinton is tanking, then he's no longer an option. And that's a longtime Democrat strategist, Stephanie Cutter. She worked for President Obama's reelection, and she said Biden could now, quote, risk a backlash from Democrats if he runs. Look at the headlines from the mainstream media. Here's one from NBC. And of course, NBC has been relentlessly promoting Hillary Clinton. They had her on Saturday Night Live in order to do a bartender scene where she sings and talks about candidacy with an actor who's dressed up like Hillary Clinton, trying to personalize her, trying to make her look authentic and genuine, even though we know she's a cold, calculating, ambitious robot. And that's what we saw presented in a very light way, and they let her get away with it in the debate the other night. NBC says, say no, Joe. They're telling Joe not to run. MSNBC says Joe Biden's new political reality. Things are getting tight for him. NPR, Joe Biden's window may have just closed. They say he's been Biden this time, of course, the would-be candidate who never really seemed like he wanted to be a candidate. So they're pushing him away even farther. Wall Street Journal, Democrats press Joe Biden to make a decision on running for the presidency. They say a polished performance from Hillary Clinton, and they use that word multiple times. If you look at these articles, everybody's talking about what a great performance Hillary Clinton gave. Yes, she gave a performance on Saturday Night Live. She's given performances on other things. She was asked a lot of softball questions the following Monday on an NBC morning news program. But a debate shouldn't be a performance. It ought to be a discussion of the issues. And the fact that they continually refer to it as a performance shows how carefully crafted it was in order to help Hillary Clinton. This is even a retired Teamster official, William G. Marrow from New Hampshire, said, it was a great performance. It would be tough for Joe Biden to come in now. Everybody, even the people who support her, have no problems anymore with this political system that we have in terms of calling these debates performances. Now, they also talk about the real deadlines that may be looming before Joe Biden. They say there are some deadlines for filing. The Georgia deadline is going to be coming up October the 29th. There's some more deadlines coming up in other states on the 6th of November, the 9th, the 17th, the 30th. That's Alabama, Arkansas, Michigan, and Florida, respectively. They say the deadlines could be subject to change, and they're not necessarily hard and fast deadlines. But who controls those deadlines? So these deadlines are set by the Democrat parties in the various states, and it could change. But it's going to depend, of course, as to who's in charge of the Democrat Party. There certainly is a contingency that doesn't like Hillary Clinton, that likes Joe Biden. All of them were running along with Barack Obama. Hillary and Biden were running, and he got the vice presidential nod. So he has a lot of people who are supporting him in the Democrat Party who would like to see him run. But it looks now like they are coalescing around Hillary after the very first debate. Now, he said just before the debate, when you tell the truth in Washington, it's called a gaffe, trying to position himself as being someone who's authentic. But I think it was very telling that Hillary had such a great performance. She had no gaffes because she didn't tell the truth. A key issue here is what she said about the Trans-Pacific Partnership. They called her on flip-flopping in her position. And she said, well, I really didn't flip-flop on TPP. I waited until the details came out, and then I decided that I didn't like it. And remember when we were watching this, we called her on this. Let's play that clip again.
Well, even with this TPP flip-flop, you remember how she held her tongue and she said, I'm going to wait till the negotiations are over to say something about it. And it wasn't until days after the negotiations were over that she says, well, this version of it, I don't agree with it. Meanwhile, for years, I think, 45 times.
And has she really been able to see it?
And
only the people who go through special non-disclosure agreements that are also members of Congress or the Senate are allowed to see that. How did she see it? How does she know what's in it? We don't know. We're going to ask some questions. Let's pick up with the audio feed, folks.
Some Democrats believe you changed your positions based on political expediency. You were against same-sex marriage. Now you're for it. You defended President Obama's immigration policies. Now you say they're too harsh.
Won't even make eye contact with her.
Dozens of times. You even called it the gold standard.
He's like, I'm sorry, Miss Clinton. I'm sorry.
Against it. Will you say anything?
Of course, it was Cokie Roberts that says she knows everything about everything, every issue.
Over the course of my entire life, I have always.
So he just hit her with all the things she flip-flopped on right off the bat.
I've been consistent over my entire life.
Let's get this out of the way.
Absorb new information. I do.
And just completely deny it.
Everything that the voters are concerned with, he hit her all in one piece.
3 years ago. That I hope
one question, so they can get that out of the way. And
it was just
Let's
finally
clear the air here.
last week. And in looking at it, it didn't meet my standards. My standards for.
Can I get a little more audio here?
For Americans, for raising wages for Americans.
How can she even say the word standard?
And I want to make sure that I look into the eyes of any middle-class American and say, this will help raise commitment. You know, when I left law school, my first job was with the Children's Defense Fund. And for all the years since, I have been focused on how we're going to unstack the deck. and how we're going to make it possible for more people to have the experience I had, you know, to be able to come from a grandfather who was a factory worker, a father who was a small business person, and now asking the people of America to elect me president.
Just for the record, are you a progressive or are you a moderate?
I'm a progressive, but I'm a progressive who likes to get things done. And I know how to find common ground.
So,
and I know how to stand my ground. And I have
she doesn't want to use the S word, socialist. But you have to understand they love to play with semantics. So again, that was our live coverage at the time of the debate, and we immediately pointed out that nobody gets to see that unless they sign non-disclosure agreements and go through a lot of other red tape, and most people in Congress haven't bothered to go through it. As a matter of fact, who would show that to Hillary Clinton? Someone who is known for not taking security seriously. Maybe she would have put the TPP on her server or shared it with some of her staff. The secret would have been out. The American public would have known how they're going to be screwed by the multinational corporations that she has previously supported, but now claims that she doesn't support. Clearly, that's not the case. And somebody asked the White House press secretary, Josh Earnest, about this, and he said, yeah, I noticed that too. He says, details do matter, and I look forward to, as soon as possible, being able to put forward the text of the agreement so that everybody can review it and make their own judgment. In other words, yeah, it still hasn't been made public, and he came about as close as he could to proving the point that she was lying, but we all know that she was lying about that. Now, the other things that were very interesting in the debate, I think, is the fact that they had both candidates, both Sanders and Clinton, because the other three really didn't do anything to establish themselves. They're polling essentially at zero. They didn't choose to attack Hillary Clinton. They said they want to make every public college and university in this country tuition free. That's what Sanders said. Clinton said essentially the same thing. We want to enable anyone to go to college. And again, when they say anyone, you have to understand what they're talking about is anyone in the world. They don't have to be an American citizen. They can come here. We'll pay for their college all the way through graduate school, presumably. And that will be at taxpayer expense. As a matter of fact, that will come out of your property taxes for your home. Maybe that's a way that they're going to enact Agenda 21 to make housing so unaffordable that no one will be able to live in anything other than about 100 or 200 square feet. And Clinton laughingly said, I have been as transparent as I know how to be. Yet, as they point out in an AP story, she's yet to explain how the server was set up, how it was serviced, whether she informed the State Department about her decision to use a private system, and most importantly, how she protected it from hacking attempts. And again, the sacred cow of the American government, national security, is the issue here. Just like it was with Bill Clinton, we were told, well, they tried to impeach him because he had an affair with somebody. No, they tried to impeach him because he lied under oath. He's an attorney, he's a president. When you lie under oath, no matter what the subject is, it didn't really matter what he was lying under oath about. The fact that he committed perjury was a crime, and that's what they tried to impeach him for. The fact that you would violate national security procedures are what's really important, even more important than any kind of information about Benghazi that they might discover in her emails. It's the violation of security protocols willfully done by Hillary Clinton. Now, one of the other things that they talked about, of course, they dance around the issue of the Federal Reserve. They want to talk about Wall Street, but they don't really want to talk about the core issue, which is the Federal Reserve. We had on CNBC, we had Dick Bove, and this is somebody who is part of a investment group. It's the Rafferty Capital Markets. He's a vice president of equity research. He was absolutely amazed that the government was going to take away some of the dividends paid to banks by the Federal Reserve. Now understand, this is a system that has been in place since the creation of the Federal Reserve. For 100 years, throughout the Great Depression, throughout the biggest Wall Street, the booms, the busts, all these cycles that we've had, every year the banks get 6% on the money that they deposit with the Federal Reserve, the cash deposits that they put on with them. Now they're able to get that money at 0%, aren't they? That's where the interest rates are. That is the great scandal. They're not talking about that. But this fellow that was Dick Bove, who was with Rafferty Capital, was concerned about the fact that they were going to take that 6%, they were going to cut it to 1.5%. They were going to take that 4.5% and put it on a highway fund. He said, this is nationalization of the banks. This is outright socialism. Do you see how far apart Wall Street and the socialists are? It isn't socialism. And what we have today is not capitalism. It is the American public being raped. Let me give you an example of this. Even if they cut the 6% to 1.5%, when you have a 0% cost on the money that you get from the Federal Reserve and you park it there, and of course, they've been parking it there because if they put it into circulation, we would have something like hyperinflation. Nevertheless, when they are able to get this money for 0% and loan it out, even at 1.5%, what's the return on that? You divide by 0, you get an infinite return. It just means that you don't become a trillionaire as quickly. And of course, we understand what they're doing with credit cards, for example. Wells Fargo is shifting their strategy in a bid to double their credit card loans. They've only got about 4% of their capital in credit card loans. You have other banks like JP Morgan that have 16% of their loans as credit cards, or Bank of America at 10%. Why do they do that? Because the interest rate, the average interest rate on credit cards right now is over 15%. It just jumped for the first time in several months, and it's now over 15%. They can get this money for 0%. The Federal Reserve will pay them 6% on this, or they can loan it to you with a credit card and get at least 15% on average. Of course, if you get delinquent or they have an issue with your credit worthiness, they will jump that up in a heartbeat. That's the kind of predatory banking that we have. It isn't an issue of Wall Street. It's an issue of the Federal Reserve. And the only way that any of these socialist policies about free tuition and all these other things that Hillary and Bernie Sanders are promising people, the only way they're going to be able to bring that to fruition is if they can use the phony money that the Federal Reserve has. That's why they won't talk about it, because it is that kind of corruption from the Federal Reserve that finances socialism that they're offering us. Stay with us. We're going to be right back, and we're going to talk about the Pope and climate change. New information about that. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Now, on the Drudge Report today, there were some updates on what is going on with the Pope, saying that there's an outright civil war going on in the Vatican. Here's the way they put it. Civil war has erupted at the top of the Catholic Church, with 13 cardinals, including Australia's Cardinal George Pell, warning the Pope in a letter that the church is in danger of collapsing like liberal Protestant churches in the modern era. Why would they say that? Well, they would say that because modern liberal churches in America, Protestant churches in America, became more concerned with liberal causes than with the traditional concerns, the religious concerns, the family concerns that they had always focused on in the past. And that's what's happening in the Catholic Church as well. That's what these cardinals are concerned about. And remember, the cardinals are the ones second to the Pope. It's the College of Cardinals that chooses the Pope. Now, he had a family conference that was going on in the Vatican. He has now asked forgiveness for several scandals that have erupted in the last couple of weeks, reminiscent of what we saw when he came to America, when he was making the tour of Washington, New York, as well as Philadelphia. The first two, of course, were completely political. They were talking about climate change. That was what he was really here to push, was climate change. He was trying to make the case to Obama, to the Congress, to the United Nations, that we needed to have global governance in order to protect the world's climate. That was what he was really concerned about, not traditional moral issues that the church is usually concerned itself with. Then he went to Philadelphia and did a families conference. And that was the site, ironically, or perhaps deliberately, the site of the worst pedophile abuse that we have seen from the Catholic Church in America. So he went right to that site and held a World Families Conference. Now at the site of another family conference at the Vatican, he comes out and asks forgiveness for some sex scandals. Let's roll the clip from Reuters.
Jesus is a realist. He says it is inevitable that there will be scandals, but woe to the man who causes scandals. Today, before I begin the catechism, in the name of the Church, I ask you for forgiveness for the scandals that have occurred recently either in Rome or in the Vatican.
Vi chiedo perdono.
And again, as you heard the Pope say, mistakes are going to happen. He said Jesus was a realist. Look, Jesus didn't say that there were going to be scandals. Jesus said he was a scandal. He said that who he was, who he claimed he was, what he did was going to be scandalous. He also said, don't offend these little ones. If you do, it'd be better for you if you're thrown into the ocean with a millstone around your neck. That's the real concern that he should be having. The concern for the victims of these sexual scandals, the pedophile victims. And this is very important because we're not just beating up on the Catholic Church. This has to do with the fact that the Pope is being used to put a moral authority on a political agenda that's being sold on junk science. And we're going to talk about that in just a moment and what the traditional Catholic cardinals have called this and said that this is not something the Catholic Church should be involved in. We don't have any book as a specialty in science. But let's take a look specifically at what this Pope is saying, because it really does impact on the moral authority, and there are people whose lives are being destroyed by these pedophile scandals. Now, Reuters is saying that there were 2 scandals within the last couple of weeks, and you saw the one where you had a Monsignor, someone who's very high, who's been at the Vatican for many years. They said there's 2 scandals involving the Vatican and the Church in Rome in the past 2 weeks. On October 3rd, a Polish Monsignor, in office since 2003, that's 12 years, held a packed news conference in which he discussed that he was gay and had been living with a man for a number of years. Now, he was subsequently fired. The second scandal they report is the Pope appeared to be referring to a scandal that it was exposed in the Italian media last week about an order of priests who run a parish in a well-to-do neighborhood in Rome. They say a clergyman there had encounters with quote-unquote vulnerable adults. They say the clergyman's illicit activities were discovered, and they were furious, and he was transferred to another part of Italy instead of being disciplined. You understand how that works? That's what they do with the pedophiles that they've found. That's been the procedure that the Vatican has done. And of course, when this Pope came into office, he told the largest circulation newspaper that he thought that about 2% of the priests were pedophiles. That would be about 8,000 priests that they're leaving in office or moving around once it's discovered. And we all know from experience that pedophiles continue this operation. That's why they have sexual predator registers, so that people in neighborhoods can know about people that have been caught doing this sort of thing, because they repeat the pattern if you don't keep them incarcerated. They're not incarcerating them. They're not even throwing them out of the priesthood. They're just moving them somewhere where people don't know about it. But there's more than 2 scandals. There was another scandal at the beginning, not even a week ago. This was an Italian priest, Don Gino Flaim, justified pedophilia on live television in Italy, and he blamed the children for seeking affection. This is an Italian priest who justified pedophilia in the clergy on live television. He blamed the children who, quote unquote, seek affection for tempting the adults. He's 75 years old. He's from the Diocese of Trento in northern Italy. He said, unfortunately, there's children who seek affection because they don't get it at home. And then when they find some priest, he can even give in to the temptation. I understand this. This is exactly what the people from SNAP, the Survivors Network of those abused by priests, said when they went for help to other priests or to nuns after they'd been abused by a priest. They were blamed. They were told that they were the problem. This is precisely the issue that we've seen over and over in the past. And it says, asked if he believed the children were in any way responsible, he said, well, in many cases, yes. In many cases, yes. And he said he could understand pedophilia, but he couldn't understand the sickness of homosexuality. Let me tell you something. Homosexuality is between consenting adults. This is against children who cannot give their consent legally. We understand that. That's why we consider this to be a crime. That's why we lock people up for that, not for homosexuality. This is what they ignore. This is what they allow to happen. And you know, quite frankly, he sounds exactly like Pope Francis. They will fire somebody because he admits that he's been in a homosexual relationship. Of course, that is in flagrant violation of the Catholic Church's policies or doctrines. He should be fired for that. Nevertheless, they will tolerate pedophiles who continue to prey on children. So why is all this important? It's important because he's trying to sell his moral authority to tell us about climate change. But this is what the conservative cardinals are telling him. They say, the church has no mandate from the Lord to pronounce on scientific matters. We believe in the autonomy of science. That was what was in the letter that I referred to at the beginning of this section, the 13 cardinals. And these are cardinals from Bologna, Toronto, New York, Galveston, Nairobi, Mexico, many areas. And of course, the leader of that group is an Australian cardinal, George Pell. This is all being done to sell climate change. And the time we have left in this segment, I want to tell you what's going on in France, because this is where they're all headed. They're going to have the massive seminar in Paris, France. That's where what this is all leading up to. That's going to be in December. There, they're going to push for a UN agenda. Perhaps we will see Obama sign a treaty without the approval of the Congress, because that seems to be an anachronism in today's Washington, that we would follow the Constitution. The president will just sign that as he wishes. But understand what's behind this and look at, in Paris, where this conference is going to be, they have the top French meteorologist has now been fired because he debunked climate hysteria. This, of course, is weatherman Philippe Verdier. He's the state-funded broadcasting giant France's television's main meteorologist. He says that they've been taken hostage by misleading data that's peddled by politicians and climatologists. In response, when he said this, his employer, the French government essentially, promptly took him off the air because he's a heretic to their religion. They put him on a forced holiday, essentially proving his point. Now, he is the chief of meteorology. He is the nation's foremost weatherman. He is called in France Mr. Weatherman. He compares the climate juggernaut to a quote-unquote war machine that needs to keep the populace in constant terror in order to advance its objectives. He says we are hostage to a planetary scandal over climate change, a war machine whose aim is to keep us in fear and uncertainty. Do you remember the most recent GOP debate where Jake Tapper comes to the GOP candidates and says, don't you think even as insurance, even if you don't believe this, we should do this as insurance? You know, we're not certain about this, but we should do it anyway. Aren't you afraid? Don't you think we should move with this? And of course, they point out in this article from New American, they say that the French prime minister had called together meteorologists in France and told them that they needed to push this agenda of global warming. French Foreign Minister Laurent Fabius called a meeting with French weathermen and the media last year. The socialist politician demanded meteorologists frighten their audiences with threat of climate chaos in their weather forecasts. And this fellow, who was the Mr. Weatherman, the head of the French weather agency, said, I was horrified by this. He said shortly after, the socialist foreign minister appeared on the cover of another magazine, posing as a weatherman, and said that there was 500 days to save the planet. He says, well, if the minister decides that he is Mr. Weatherman, then the real Mr. Weatherman can also express himself on the subject in a lucid manner. What is shameful is the pressure that is placed on us to say that if we don't hurry, it'll be an apocalypse. Stay with us. We'll be right back talking about the release in drone information, classified documents. Today, there was a new leak of classified documents, this time about the American drone program, or more clearly, the American assassination program. This is done by the same people that leaked the Ed Snowden documents, Glenn Greenwald, and those at The Intercept. We'll talk about that in a moment, but first, I want to give you this story from Popular Science that I think is an allegory about how rapidly technology can change in our society and change things into a world that we don't really realize, with dangers that we've never seen before. Tesla cars last night became autonomous overnight. And as Popular Science puts it, the rise of the machines has begun, fittingly via an overnight wireless global awakening. They say owners of Tesla Model S and Model X electric cars woke up today to cars that were suddenly empowered to drive themselves down the road, simply with a software update. And of course, they were able to do this because they had already pre-positioned the hardware into the vehicle. For example, they've got forward radar, they've got forward-looking cameras, they've got long-range ultrasonic sensors, braking and steering controls. So all they have to do is just change the software, and it's ready to go into autonomous mode. They say because the software is still at an early stage, it's important that people exercise caution. But in the long term, drivers will not need to keep their hands on the wheel. Eventually, there won't be steering wheels or pedals. Isn't that exciting? Well, quite frankly, I'm not interested in a car like that. Even though it can change lanes, even though it can self-park, even though it can brake and stop automatically, and it can accelerate automatically when people get out of their way in the lanes, this is how quickly things can change. And of course, we've talked many times about the dangers of autonomous driven cars. The dangers, of course, are obvious in terms of software malfunctions or hardware malfunctions where you don't have any control, where you've lost the steering wheel, where you've lost the brakes, where you become totally dependent on the technology. But it also allows the government to exercise a control grid. And one of the things that they mention in this Tesla article, they say another distinction from other semi-autonomous systems is that the Tesla cars will collect data about their use in order to refine and enhance the system, and also to share that information with the government, of course. And so that brings us to where we are with the information about drones. We know that drones have been used as assassination vehicles. We know that they've used them to kill American citizens without due process in other countries. And we've asked the question, how long will it be before the president can set up a drone kill list and execute people that he doesn't like in America? Because in principle, nothing has essentially changed in that. Now, this new leak is something that was hinted at in the film documentary Citizen 4. They say that in the film Citizen 4, at one point, Greenwald shows Snowden a diagram of the authorization chain for drone strikes that ends with the president, one that looks very similar to the one that was included in today's publication. There were slides that were leaked in this. And the person who leaked this information, I think, had a very important message. He says, this outrageous explosion of watch listing, of monitoring people, of racking and stacking them into lists, of assigning them numbers, assigning them quote-unquote baseball cards, assigning them numbers, their death sentences without notice on a worldwide battlefield. It was from the very first instance wrong, he says. We're allowing this to happen, and by we, I mean every American citizen who has access to this information now, but continues to do nothing about it. That's exactly right. We've had situations in the past where we've been told about this, we've been told about what's going on with the NSA, what's been done about that. A lot of us are upset about it. A few politicians like Rand Paul have introduced bills to try to stop this, but the vast majority of politicians don't want anything done about it. The vast majority of Americans are okay being spied upon continuously because they don't value liberty. They don't understand the danger of a government that knows everything about you, that distrusts you, that paints you as a threat to the government. That is incredibly dangerous. And of course, we've seen politicians at high levels being blackmailed with this information. Now, of course, what is the reaction of the press? A good example of this is the Daily Mail. The way they react to this is the way that we've seen the press react to the leaks that we got from Snowden or the information that we got from Manning and WikiLeaks about criminal action from the government. Instead of going after the government, instead of criticizing the government, of course, they go after the person who leaked the information. And that's what we see in this headline from the Daily Mail. They say, U.S. spy chiefs are hunting the new Snowden. Whistleblower leaks top secret drone assassination program that reveals how 90% of the people killed in a 5-month spree weren't targeted. In other words, this is what they used to call collateral damage. But that's not a problem, is it? The problem is that the information got out. The problem isn't that we're murdering people indiscriminately, that we're just doing this by executive order. No, that's not the problem. The problem is that the information got out. And of course, when they talk about this, we've had all these different euphemisms that they use. Targeted killings, we call the list, they've called that the disposition matrix. All of that doesn't take away from what is essentially the issue here. And that is that we have a government that is using assassination as their policy. They say at the beginning of the article, drones are simply a tool. The policy is assassination. And I'm reminded that years and years ago in the church committee hearings, the nation and the world were appalled when William Colby, the then director of the CIA, was honest and candid and said, as he held up guns, these are assassination guns. We can shoot people, the bullets dissolve, and you don't know who we've killed. And yet we have come to accept this as normal, as acceptable. And you have to ask yourself, who watches the watchers? These are the people who we have hired supposedly to protect us and to make us safe. Who keeps us safe from them when they go off the rails? What happens when their geospatial intelligence programs and their Minority Report software tags somebody who really isn't a threat? When we get a false positive on that. And that's where we're going. This article doesn't really talk about the current technology. It doesn't really even talk about the future technology, the near future technology that may be ready to be deployed at this point. We know from the author Ann Jacobson, who wrote The Pentagon's Brain, exposing the history of DARPA, we know that they had drone programs back in Vietnam. We know that Operation Northwoods, they were talking about remote-controlled civilian airliners that they would fly into buildings so they could blame it on the Cubans, not Al-Qaeda, not Osama bin Laden, but the Cubans at the time, so they could have an excuse to invade Cuba. This has been around a very long time. They keep technology on hold for a very long time, and we've had glimpses of what is in the near future. And of course, when you look at a Pentagon mindset that wants to do remote control killing, you have to keep this in mind with the robots that DARPA is developing. The fact that they want to have killing machines that they can operate from a distance that perhaps will be autonomous. This is the new Terminator future that they're planning for us. They already have much of the technology in place, and that is what's very concerning about this. Not only that they would have this program where the president sets up his list, but what is coming next. And we've talked about this earlier this week. It was just within the last week or so that DARPA came out with a drone program saying that they want to have a system called Icarus that will essentially dissolve the drone, just as we have William Colby talking about how he has assassination bullets that dissolve so we don't know who they've assassinated. Well, now they can have drones that disappear after they've killed innocent people, because 90% plus of the people that they're killing are innocent people. All that does is harm our effort, our war effort, but it is a shedding of innocent blood, and it is an authoritarian assassination policy. Should we be concerned? Look at this article from Politico talking about Obama's efforts to nudge America to use behavioral science to adapt what you think in terms of the government, or think about what the government tells you, to follow their agenda. They call it now nudging. We used to call it propaganda. And when you look at this article from Infowars.com today about the Department of Justice creating a new domestic terrorism division, understand that the gloves have come off. They're actively and openly engaging in propaganda and assassination of their political enemies. They're trying to convince the public using social media and other sophisticated methods who their enemies are. And of course, we know who they think their enemies are. They have said, and specifically say, as they introduced this program, they're far more worried about domestic terrorists, about people who are anti-government, than they are about Islamic jihadists that we have been told are the real targets. No, the real targets are the people who question the government's authority. They made that very clear, and Alex Jones pointed that out today when he said they want to talk about sovereign citizens who question the government's authority in a certain area. What about the illegal immigrants who come in and ignore everything about the government's authority? Of course, they're not concerned about them. That's what we need to be concerned about, a government that is going to use these tools, these assassination tools, these Minority Report tools, to identify their political opposition. Stay with us when we come back. We're going to talk to Joe Biggs, our reporter who went to San Antonio today to cover the Hillary Clinton rally, and Michael Zimmerman, the cameraman who was with him. We'll be right back. Joining us now are Joe Biggs and cameraman Michael Zimmerman. And of course, they went to San Antonio for the Hillary Clinton rally. We want to get their impressions, let them tell us what they saw. And of course, they had a very valuable tool stolen from them to boot. So we're going to talk to Michael Zimmerman about that. So give us your impression of the rally. First of all, how big was it?
I would say roughly about 500 people inside that area. What they call it, the historic Sunset Station. It's right in downtown San Antonio. And it's kind of funny because when we got back here, I started reading through some of the articles, and people are quite frankly lying. I mean, they're saying thousands of people showed up, and they're using these tricky camera angles so they can only show like the immediate little area where they kind of force people into this area and corralled them in there. Outside of that, it was very empty inside. I mean, it was not even a full area. Not the kind of crowds that you saw when you went to see Donald Trump. Oh yeah, Donald Trump's going to pull in 20,000+ people, and you know. And that was genuine. You were there. Oh yeah, they weren't using camera angles. Yeah, there was no camera angles. I mean, that was the Dallas Mavericks basketball coliseum. I mean, it was packed to the brim, and you saw motivated people at the Trump thing. You had people that were willing to talk and have conversations. Here, you had a lot of people that were just like. Just kind of zombified, and when you would talk to them, just really didn't seem there. They were taking selfies. I saw, you know, I kept pointing to his attention. There were girls going in front of this Clinton picture where it looked like an old photo of Stalin, and they were taking selfies in front of it, and just people crowding around it, and just thinking it was the coolest thing in the world to be around it. And I just thought it was completely disgusting. You know, well, I think there are a lot of low information voters because, quite frankly, that's what they want. She only had her first live interview less than a month ago with Wolf Blitzer. And he asked her what her accomplishments were. Remember, she pulled a blank. Yeah. She kind of zoned out. She didn't have anything that she could come up with. They're trying to protect her. As I mentioned at the beginning of the broadcast, the Democrat Party top brass has coalesced around her. She's a very managed, very packaged candidate. They want to move all the opposition out of the way. We saw no opposition in the debate as we were watching it live the other night. Everybody fell into line. Even the guys who are polling 0% would not challenge her to try to push out. And of course, Bernie gave her a pass on the email issue, saying, I don't want to hear about your emails. Well, it's not about her emails. It's about national security. They use that to justify everything, but they don't want to have that conversation. And
some voices within the Democrat Party are saying this is a very dangerous situation because we're going to have somebody who really hasn't been tested, who really hasn't been vetted, who hasn't been challenged on her issues, and she is going to be challenged. And there are some strong contenders that are going to come out. Whoever comes out of the GOP situation is going to be a lot stronger, I think, because there are a lot more people that are there in that debate. So.
It seemed like too at the in the rally or the debate that everyone was just kind of playing softball with her, and they were all trying to boost her up and help her. You know, they put O'Malley on one side, Sanders on the other, and they kept just kind of like, oh, well, remember back a couple of years ago, I supported Hillary for that, and they would shake hands and talk and laugh. You don't see that in the GOP debate. You saw hit after hit after hit. It was just like a reality show. And even I was surprised the other day, I was watching Fox, and Trump even came out and he was talking to, I believe it was one of the nightly guys, I can't remember right now, but he said, when I went on, it was like a circus, like a reality show. But then when you had the Democratic debate, it was just softball question after softball question. No one really got challenged on anything. And it seemed like everybody was there to help boost Hillary up. And that's exactly how I feel too. And a lot of the people there today, I mean.
Well, Anderson Cooper said he wasn't going to try to really pit them against each other with any hard
Anderson Mockingbird Cooper?
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. But Jake Tapper made a point of doing that and said he was going to do that.
Yeah.
But you got hassled, as cameraman, Michael, you got hassled by security. You go in with a lot of equipment.
Right.
Tell us how security was there.
So they had every department you can imagine out there today. They had Secret Service, Homeland Security, San
Which, by the way,
Antonio
she's the
Police.
only candidate that gets Secret Service.
Of course.
The only candidate. And Donald Trump was complaining about that, saying this is not fair, and even pointed out, now some people have said that perhaps the reason that she's getting Secret Service protection is because she's a former First Lady. However, Barack Obama was getting it far earlier than Donald Trump. He had much smaller crowds, and he said, it's because I'm a Republican, they don't want to give it to me. So who knows? But certainly they're not treating him the same way they did Barack Obama 8 years ago. But sorry, go ahead. So they had Secret Service there along with
Right. So when we first entered this secure area they had set up at the Sunset Station there, they had bomb-sniffing dogs go through our bags. They patted us down, went over us with metal detectors, and that was fine. And then we exited to film some of the people outside and then re-enter the area. And when I re-entered the area, they asked me to empty out my pockets, and they found my Leatherman multi-tool for just adjusting. It has a screwdriver on it. It has a small knife on it.
Like a Swiss Army knife.
Exactly.
Like that, yeah.
Yeah. Very, very small knife. Definitely not a weapon, primarily at least. And anyway,
nail clippers. It's probably more dangerous.
Right. Absolutely. And they told me that they would hang on to that for me and that I could pick it up when we leave. And when I went back to speak to that same Secret Service agent, she told me, I'm sorry, I couldn't keep that here.
So yeah, the feds.
Let me hang on to that for you.
And they're going to give that. That's going to be part of the package for free things when you vote for her. Hey, there we go. First door prize for all you coming across looking for the American dream.
When you went to the Trump rally, did you have bomb sniffing dogs and all that kind of stuff there?
Well, I went through the back credentialed media area, so it wasn't as serious. Most of these people were kind of well known. It's the same people I see when I go to events all the time. So you already had that kind of rapport built and all that. So it wasn't that bad. But it looked like they had that in the regular entrance. They had stuff like that, but it's very light. You didn't see too many security going crazy, not that much of going on. But one of the things we talked about earlier, this event, this is Hillary Clinton. She's supposed to be speaking for women everywhere, for feminists or feminism. She's supposed to be the #1, candidate for Hispanics and blacks. And, Texas is the second largest state. There's a lot of people in Texas. 500 people show up.
Yeah.
500 people.
Yeah.
Texas. When I went to the
right after her debate performance,
her winning
lap.
Her victory that CNN says, but clearly the poll numbers show that she didn't win that. But Donald Trump packs in 20,000 people, not just 20,000 Americans, but people who came over from other countries. That's the kind of pull he's getting. 500 people came in this little area, and I just can't get over that. And the fact that the pictures that they had there, these Stalin banners, imagine if Donald Trump would have done that. If any of one of the GOP candidates would have had these pictures, that would be blasted all over the news all day, every day. This guy's going to be a dictator. He's a racist. He wants to build a wall. He's like Stalin. Screw this guy. You
mentioned the music that they had.
Oh, okay. That's the funniest part. So when they mention, you know, Viva los Hillary, whatever. And they announce her and she comes out with Castro. You hear the meanwhile, there's the, you know,
mariachi
the customary
band,
mariachi band and the girls with the flags and the colorful clothes and stuff. Again, if that would have been a GOP guy, racist, Donald Trump's racist. How is he going to play this racist music?
You're playing
He's
the
a white
stereotypes, right? You're reducing the Mexican culture to a stereotype.
When you're on the right,
I would say,
you can be called a racist, but when you're on the left being racist, well, that's not racist. That's just being politically correct and cool and normal and hipster and ready for a new age in America.
Yeah. She owns those voters, so she can do whatever she wants.
Literally, she probably paid for them to be there because, I mean, quite honestly, I felt more sick being at that than I did, you know, almost catching malaria in Afghanistan. I mean, that is not a pleasant feeling.
Well, real quickly, did you see any signs for Bernie Sanders?
No, I didn't see anything about Bernie Sanders. There was a lot of people outside with the Hillary for prison stuff. There was one other guy that had a shirt, you know, like we said, we've been sold out for a while, but people got creative, made their own banners. There was a lot of people out there saying that Hillary's not for babies. There was a lot of Hispanic people on the outside that couldn't get in who said that Hillary Clinton kills babies. She's not for women.
There was a large number of protesters, especially considering the size of the Hillary supporters. There.
I mean, there was a lot. It was equally 500 inside, about, you know, almost 500 outside, stretched along the fence out that way, protesting up and down the road.
Interesting.
So, you know, like I said, mainstream media is going to blow it out of proportion, say that she had this huge hit crowd. Everyone showed up. Texas is behind Hillary. Her first line was, "Who's ready to turn Texas blue?" You know, and then all of a sudden you heard the guys outside the fence, "Hillary for prison, blue, boo, hell no." And it completely overpowered what her PA system had going with her going. And I'm sitting there like I had to smile on my face. And that's when I just started screaming, "Hillary for prison." I got motivated. I was about ready to pull like a Hulk Hogan and rip my t-shirt off and just go like, ah.
So she's got a crowd of only about 500, although they're exaggerating that. There's a large number of protesters there compared to Trump, who had a gigantic crowd, over 20,000 people. How many protesters would you say you had there?
Probably 200.
Wow.
I mean, for anti.
Yeah,
so
huge,
compared to
huge
that
difference.
Yeah.
Huge difference. Well, that's it for tonight's news. Join us again tomorrow at 7 Central, 8 p.m. Eastern. Thank you so much, Joe and Michael Zimmerman.
Hillary for prison.
Dave, my mind is going. I can feel it.